Kennedy is an environmental lawyer, an activist, widely read author, and radio show host. He was educated at Harvard University, London School of Economics, University of Virginia Law School, received a Master's of Law from Pace University in New York. Did I miss any schools? He's been named as Time Magazine's one of our heroes of the planet, and he's a founding partner of the law firm of Kennedy and Madonna. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you all very much, and thank you for coming out here on a weekday night. Excuse my voice. I hope it'll get a little bit better as I speak, and I'm going to be brief, but I want to thank all the doctors and the attorneys who came here tonight to explain some of these issues to you. I'm going to explain a little bit about my background. I've been practicing environmental law for 34 years. I teach at a litigation clinic at Pace University Law School in White Plains, New York. My students, I actually have a practice order that allows them to practice law under my supervision. So I give each of those students 4 polluters to sue at the beginning of the semester. They file complaints, they do discovery, they do depositions, they go to court, they argue their cases. If they don't win the case, they don't pass the course. And we sue polluters on the Hudson River. I started my career working for fishermen on the Hudson River. And we've brought over 500 successful lawsuits, mainly to clean up the Hudson River. We forced polluters to spend over $5 billion remediating the Hudson. And today, largely as a result of our work, the Hudson is the richest waterway. This was a river that when I started working on it, it was a national joke. It was dead water for 20-mile stretches north of New York City, south of Albany. It caught fire, it turned color. Today, it is the richest waterway in the North Atlantic. It produces more pounds of fish per acre, more biomass per gallon than any other waterway in the Atlantic Ocean north of the equator, and it's the last major river system left in the entire North Atlantic. It still has strong spawning stocks of all of its historical species of migratory fish. The miraculous resurrection of the Hudson has inspired the creation of river keepers. Now, 270 river keepers. We each have a patrol boat, each have a full-time paid water keeper. They patrol their local waterways, they track down polluters, and they litigate against them. We have one on Santa Monica Bay, San Diego Bay, the Orange County coast, the Santa Barbara Channel. We have a picket line of patrol boats up and down the coast. I'm telling you all this because most of the cases I bring are public interest cases, and I feel very lucky to be able to do that. Most of the environmental laws that we have in this country have citizen suit provisions in them that says when the government fails to enforce the law against a polluter who's breaking that law, and any citizen can step into the shoes of the United States Attorney and prosecute that polluter for penalties and for injunctive relief. In those cases, the attorneys don't make money. These are not, they get their fees paid on an hourly basis. But they're not what attorneys would call big money cases. And I feel very fortunate that I don't need to make that money and that I'm able to engage in these battles that I love and that I believe are going to leave the world a better place. So I'm fighting these kind of cases all the time. Now, and I live in New York, but 2 years ago I married a California girl. You may know her. Her name is Cheryl Hines, and she is an actress from was on Curb Your Enthusiasm and a number of other shows, but I moved to be with her. I moved to Los Angeles. I live 34 miles from where we are right now. I didn't intend to get in a lot of big fist fights when I came here to California. I wanted to live peacefully. I have friends, 2 of my closest friends in the world, Klaus von Heidegger and Jamie, who are sitting right over here, who live in Chatsworth, and whose homes were affected by this. And I got calls from many, many attorneys when this happened who asked me, would you be involved? Because I've been involved in almost all of the big hydrocarbon and oil cases over the past 20 years in this country. I'm involved to this day in the BP case, which now we're finally settling. I was involved in suing Exxon up in Alaska. If you think if you think of a major oil spill in this country, I've been involved in it. And also the other big polluter cases. And I also have, in addition to teaching and being the environmental litigator for the waterkeeper movement and for many of the individual waterkeepers, I also have a law firm, which you'll see up here, is called Kennedy Madonna. And we oftentimes partner with many of these other large law firms we've heard of who specialize in class action cases. In class action cases, the lawyers do make a lot of money. And they bring in a lot of money for their clients. And they spend a lot of money trying to win those cases. In some cases, lawyers are going up against very, very powerful entities like Southern California Gas, and they may have to put up $5 or $10 or $20 million. And if they lose that case, they lose the money. They're doing it on contingency. So the clients don't lose the money. But I got phone calls from many, many attorneys who asked me to help them on these cases. Because I'm not interested in money, I went with, and there are many, many law firms here, and I've worked with almost all of them, and you will see their advertising, you'll meet them, and you'll hear from them. And they're all competent, or most of them, almost all of them are competent. Most of them are very, very good, and they're going to get you good settlements. But I wanted to go with the people that I thought were best for this particular case. And I also made one of the conditions that whatever firm that I got involved with had to charge the lowest fees. Because I want to make sure that when we win this case, that the majority of the money goes to the clients and goes to the people who have those losses. I ended up helping to put together a team that I believe includes the best attorneys suited for this particular case. One of those is Rex Paris. Rex is part of this team because he has more experience than anybody in this state in suing the oil industry and the gas industry, particularly over well injections. He spent the last 2 years bringing a RICO case, which is a hybrid case, it's half criminal, half civil, against the gas companies in Southern California because virtually every injection well in this state is being operated illegally. And it's being operated in cahoots with the government officials who are supposed to be regulating the gas industry. The principal agency, which is called DOGGR, which stands for the Division of Oil and Gas and Geothermal Resources, is a poster child for what we call captive agency phenomena. This is an agency that becomes captured by the industry that it's supposed to regulate. So you think that DOGGR is protecting the public, but oftentimes DOGGR sees its own role as a sock puppet or the oil and gas industry that it's supposed to regulate. So instead of protecting the rest of us, it ends up protecting that industry, and their pronouncements cannot be trusted. And what you see is whenever you see large-scale environmental injury of the kind that we see here, you'll also see the subversion of democracy. You'll see the disappearance of transparency, which is the keystone of democracy. And it becomes hard figuring out, asking questions. You know, the first question I asked about this is, why aren't they flaring this gas? Why aren't they flaring the gas now that there may be a really good reason that they're not flaring the gas? But if you look at these videos that we made, that show the gas pouring down on these communities, you know, my first reaction is, why don't they hook up some pipes, bring that gas, that well that blew up, it blew up at 9,000 feet deep. It's just like the BP oil spill. And the gas is now going down to the bottom and coming back up, and going through the borehole and coming out, and you know, getting into our communities. So they plugged the top of that well, but it's not stopping the gas from coming up. So maybe one of the engineering solutions that occurred to me from having seen these problems before is you hook a quarter-mile pipe up to the top of that well, and you unplug it, bring it up to a ridge line far away from the public, and begin flaring it to reduce the pressure down below and suck the gas up. Now, no, I'm not an engineer. I'm a lawyer. I don't know anything about this except what I've seen in the past. But I ought to be able to ask somebody that question and get a straight answer. Like, you try doing that. You can't get that kind of answer. Because what you're doing is operating in secret. They're talking to each other, but they're not talking to us. They're not keeping us informed. They're telling us things that we know, you know, are not true. They say, well, you know, it's methane gas coming out of here, and methane gas doesn't hurt you. Well, it's 25% of the methane gas in the entire state. We have Jerry Brown over in Paris, France, talking about how great the state of California is on global warming. And yet, 25% of the methane gas, which is 84 times as efficient at trapping heat and carbon, is coming out of a single well that he hasn't even come down here to visit. So, you know, I'm a Democrat. But, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing as Democratic children or Republican children. If you're doing something wrong, it's wrong whether you're Republican or Democrat. And we deserve the truth. Oh, you know, and we know this, I know this. If you've got a methane leak, it's not just methane that's coming out of that hole. There's benzene and ethylbenzene, which is extremely carcinogenic. How do I know this? Because I'm a senior attorney for NRDC, which is the biggest environmental group in the country, and we wrote the laws that made the gasoline companies put the benzene captures on the gas tanks. So you know, when you were younger and you wanted to fill up your car with gas, you took the handle off and you put it in your car. There wasn't that kind of cup thing there is on it now. We made them put that cup on it because that captures the benzene. Because the people who worked in the gas stations were getting enormous exposures to benzene because they were around it all the time. And benzene, not only is it carcinogenic, but it bioaccumulates. That means every time you breathe benzene, it stays in your body. And some of it stays with you for the rest of your life. And every molecule that gets in you is toxic and is carcinogenic. And the more you get, the more likely you are to get cancer. So all of us get a little tiny bit of benzene every time we fill up our car. But that's just a little part of our lives. But you don't want to be breathing that stuff all night long. Well, if you live in Chatsworth, or if you live in Portland, Porter Ranch, you're breathing that stuff all night long. Because it's not just the methane that's coming out. It's benzene, it's ethylbenzene, it's toluene, it's xylene, which are teratogenic and mutagenic, which means they cause birth defects, and they cause miscarriages. It's radon, which is extremely carcinogenic. Most of the a case of lung cancer in this country in people who don't smoke cigarettes comes from radon. And wherever you see methane, you're also going to see radon. Well, do you think they've even measured for radon? Do you think they have? I don't know, because nobody told me. Because they're not being straight with us. This is what the government is supposed to do. It's supposed to tell you, here's what we're finding. You know, the people who live in this community were smelling something horrible. It smelled like rotten eggs. The gas company said, oh, don't worry, that's just mercaptans. Well, mercaptans are bad, so you should worry about it. But then we started doing measuring ourselves, my group of lawyers, and we found out that it's not just mercaptans, it's sulfides, and sulfides can be really dangerous. This is hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide, and it smells like rotten eggs too. And usually it's not associated with gas, it's usually associated with oil. But this storage area, which is 2 miles deep, was not a former gas well. It was a former oil dome. So maybe that hydrogen sulfide, that sulfur dioxide, is not really mercaptans. Maybe those are sulfides that are coming up from that former oil well. And hydrogen sulfide is really dangerous. It causes brain damage, it causes kidney damage, it causes liver damage. It can kill you if there's enough of it. It's the most dangerous gas that is associated with hydrocarbon activities and drilling activities. We have a right to know whether we're breathing mercaptans or whether we're breathing hydrogen sulfide. Why don't we know that? It's because the government is in cahoots with the oil companies. Why is it that, you know, I've been involved in hundreds and hundreds of lawsuits. I've been involved in some of the worst environmental disasters in our country over the past 30 years. It is very rare to see what you see in this case, which is children who are actually hurt and hurt instantaneously. And as soon as I heard about this, I picked up an engineer who was a former employee of Dogger, and I picked up a realtor who's an employee of one of the biggest real estate firms in this country, very, very active in this area, and I said, let's go for a drive. And we went out and we drove through these neighborhoods. We drove through Porter Ranch Estates, and we drove all around, and I kept jumping out of the car whenever I saw somebody walking on the street and talking to people. And that day, I couldn't find a single person who was not directly affected or who did not have somebody in their family who was affected. And these people I talked to a Korean lady who was wearing a mask on her face. She spoke very little English. But I said to her, do you smell the gas? And she said, yes, I'm vomiting, vomiting, vomiting. I talked to two kids, a 16-year-old kid who was driving a car and his sister. They said that their brother has nosebleeds, their little brother has nosebleeds all the time. We talked to people who had asthma, people who had rashes, people who were dizzy, people who were vomiting, had nausea, had stomach pains, pulmonary issues, who were having difficulty breathing. You don't see this in normal environmental crises. Usually there's a latency period, so you know people who are exposed and you want to get them medical monitoring, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that people who now have been exposed to these illnesses, that they get free medical monitoring for the rest of their lives. That's what they're entitled to. But in the meantime, why are these people still living there? There's 2,000 people in those communities who want to move.
Yeah.
My friends Klaus and Jamie have the wherewithal to move, so they got out of their house. And they moved to a nearby house. They moved to a house over in Malibu. Many of the people who live there don't have the wherewithal to do that. So if this were a normal natural disaster or human-made disaster, you'd see the governor coming with a group of news people, and he'd be touring the neighborhood, and he'd be talking to people, and he'd say, let's get these people out of here, and let's get them housing that is comparable to the housing that they're leaving, and let's make it as easy for them as possible. And let's make it easy for them, for their children, to leave that school and go to a comparable school that's convenient for them without getting any kind of penalty. And let's make all this stuff happen, and let's make it happen yesterday.
Yeah.
That's what you would normally see. And the reason we brought a class action suit, because a class action suit is not suitable for getting all of you people compensated for the losses that you're going to suffer, the property losses and the health losses. A class action, because all of your losses are going to be different. They're going to be unique. So you don't want to do a class action, but we brought a class action to get jurisdiction so we can get injunctive relief and we can demand immediately from the governor and tell the governor, you come down here and fix this problem and treat it like the catastrophe that it is. I don't want to think ill of people. I don't want to question why is Governor Brown not down here. But I know this, that this company gave $500,000 to Republican and Democratic politicians in this state last year, and $30,000 to the governor. And all of these politicians seem to have blind spots when it comes to disasters like this one. I like Jerry Brown. Jerry Brown is very good on most of my issues, but he does have a blind spot when it comes to oil companies. And his sister sits on the board of the parent company that is at fault here. So we have to, in this case, and I'm not saying that there's corruption, but what I'm saying is that there's an appearance of something that smells like hydrogen sulfide. And that the government, we cannot trust the government to protect us. This is a fist fight, and you're gonna need the lawyers, and you're gonna need the lawyers to do this right and to make sure that you get your compensation. And one of the things that I did, I went and drove through these neighborhoods, and I was with, as I said, I was with an engineer. And the engineer said, who used to work for Dogger. And the engineer said, you know what the problem is? That well, that blue, is 62, it was built in 1954. That's the year I was born. And I can tell you things fall apart in 62 years. And back then, if they had just waited 20 years to 1974, they passed the Safe Drinking Water Act. And the Safe Drinking Water Act says you can't build a storage injection well unless it has a concrete casing from the wellhead from the top all the way down to the top of the dome. So this well is 2 miles deep, 9,000 feet. And for at least a mile, there's no concrete casing. It's just a 7-inch metal tube going through a big borehole in the ground. So they knew it was going to break. Of course it's going to break. The only question is how. It's rusting. And the oxidation that takes place in those well holes is accelerated by the gases and the acids. So we know it's going to break soon. The only question is, When is it going to break? They knew it was going to break. It's a time bomb sitting below the ground. Why weren't they prepared for this? And guess what? There's 92 other wells that are exactly the same, and they have the same problem. Now, I have a friend who just bought a house, or sold his house in Texas. And in Texas, they have a rule that if somebody has ever seen a ghost in your house, you have to report that to the buyer. He had a ghost in his house. And the buyer said he didn't report it and sued him, and he had to give the money back. In the state of California, if you had somebody who died in your house, you have to report that to the buyer, or they can revoke the contract. Because the oil company is so powerful, it doesn't have to report that it's got 92 wells who are all in violation of the law 100 feet from your house, and every one of them is going to fail. When we looked at this, the realtor who was with us in the car she said, holy cow, but she didn't say cow. She said, this is like that movie Poltergeist, you know, where they didn't tell everybody that they put the housing development on top of the graveyard. And the ghost started coming out of the ground. Well, that's what's happening here. That well is 9,000 feet deep, and the valve that broke is 9,000 feet, and the well is leaking at 9,000 feet. And a lot of that gas is coming up through the borehole, but not all of it. A lot of it is just going through the ground 2 miles deep, and then it's percolating upward. And it's coming up through your basements, and it's coming up through your living rooms, and through your nurseries, and percolating up through your house. That's what's happening. And if it hits an aquifer on the way up, it's poisoning that aquifer with benzene and toluene and xylene and ethylbenzene and all of these other contaminants. And the aquifer is then carrying it other places where we don't know and spreading it around and dispersing it, so it's coming up. Well, now that we know that, what do you think the value of your house is? Would you have paid for that house at value if you knew that that gas leak was bound to happen under your house? A realtor said, how many people here were told by their realtor that there was a field of injection wells, 98 injection wells, less than a half mile from your house? How many people?
None of us.
Okay, none of you. Well, how many people think somebody should have told you that? Right. So, here's what the realtor said to me. She said, this is what we call in our business a default desert. And she said, here's what is going to happen. There's people in this community who paid $1.2 million for their house. They borrowed $800,000 from the bank to get that house. The house is now worth $500,000 tops, and it's going to go to the speculators, the vultures, who come in and pick them up with the hope that it'll get cleaned up someday. But once one house is sold for $500,000, and every house in the area is worth no more than $500,000. So many of those houses are underwater now. And the people, and you know, even if you want to stay in that neighborhood, your house is no longer ever going to be worth what it was worth when you paid for it, because they lied to you. So the question is, you know, clearly all of you have to be reimbursed. And you all ought to get as much money as you can from that reimbursement. All the attorneys, you know, all the different law firms who are soliciting you are going to get you the money. What I've told my partners is, I'm not going to be involved with you unless you're the lowest price law firm. I already know you're the best. The other, Brian Panish, who's not here tonight, is regarded around the country as probably one of the best trial lawyers, if not the best in the country. He got a $4.9 billion judgment, the biggest judgment in the history of California, from one person. He has repeatedly sued Southern California Gas and got multi-million-dollar judgments for one person. And I made sure that he is a partner in this case. The other partner that I have is John Morgan, who has the biggest law firm in the country and was the leader in the BP case, which I'm one of the attorneys on. So we have Rex, who is the best oil and gas guy in the state. We have Brian Panish, and we have John Morgan, and we have a crew of really great attorneys here, and they've all made the personal commitment to me that they're going to have the lowest cost of any attorney, of any of the major firms that are coming in here and soliciting in this case. Oh, and that's what I'm worried about. First, I'm worried about one thing, my first thing, my reputation. That, 2 years from now, when you guys get your settlement, that all of that, I can walk through this neighborhood and all of you are going to be patting me on the back and giving me a hug. Because I don't care about money. And I want to make sure that you get the biggest settlements, and I want to make sure that, that this gas leak is stopped, that your children are protected, that public health is protected, and I'm going to be part of this lawsuit from now till the end of it. I'm getting a pro hac admittance in this case so that I can sit at the table and that I can argue this lawsuit. And these guys are all litigators. They're not the kind of people who come in and they're very good at settling cases, but if the case doesn't settle, it's hard to get them on the telephone. These are people who are going to answer your telephone calls. Oh, and I'm going to be there, and I'm going to argue this case in front of the judge, and it's right next to my home, and it's, to me, somebody picked a fight, and they came after Klaus and Jamie, and those are my friends, and I feel like it's my job to be part of this fist fight, and I look forward to working with you all, and whoever you sign with, to work to make sure that we get justice for this community. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. I expect I'll see a lot of you over the next year or two, and I think I've taken up enough of your time. Thank you all.